Part 2, Chapter 7. As the fairies didn't answer, the Queen of the Fairies said, "We will grant him the power to come again into fairyland on one day in every year." At this moment Kay heard again that heavy tread which had so disturbed him at lunch. Kay's enemies, the King of the Fairies, said, and at once the lights seemed to go out, the fairies vanished. Groping in the dark, the children found each other. The field mouse was chattering teeth was saying to them, "Well, it ended all right, but I was never ever so scared, not even that time with the sparrowhawk." He groped his way to the trapdoor, which he opened, and they slid back down into his dining room, where they had heard the voices of a man saying, "Well, it's no good waiting any longer. Whether they've gone right away from us. Now it's my belief that they've been in the mill the whole time." "How could they have been in the mill?" another man said. "In all this mud, and their footprints would have shown. Inside the mill, in all that flour, their footprints would have shown too. They've beaten us, but how they beat us, I'm blessed if I can think." "I can't think," another said. "Abner won't be too pleased," another said, "and when he hears the results of today, I told you one of the aeroplanes had better be kept in the air to observe." "Oh, you told us a lot, didn't you?" another voice said. "Blessed if I haven't got pins and needles all over me crouching there by the bridge," one of the men said as they moved off. "And I have," another said. "It isn't pins and needles," Susan said. "The fairies are pecking at them. Look here." Indeed, down at the tree foot the children saw countless little fairies jabbing and tweaking the men. They looked like little fireflies dancing to and from the great dark figures. "Blessed if we haven't got all the rheumatics waiting like this," a man growled. "Come on, we'll get home before we're paralysed." After this the men hurried away. "I say," Kay said, "it's quite dark. Whatever time it is, I say, Mouse, I'm awfully sorry that we've stayed so long." But his watch was still at 6:30. When they had said goodbye, the field mouse opened the front door at the foot of the elm. The children joined hands. Kay pressed the button of his box, and they resumed their shapes and fished out the boats from the hollow of the elm tree's roots. "Come along," Kay said, "we better hurry." As they came into the garden of Seekings, they saw that the house was lit up at every window and the doors were wide open. "Good heavens," Kay said, "look at this." While they had been away, the study and the hall had been turned topsy-turvy, the carpets taken up and rolled back, every drawer and cupboard ransacked, and every book moved onto the shelves. The house had been thoroughly searched. Susan and Jemima cried out that the rooms had been turned topsy-turvy, but someone who had smoked strong shag tobacco. While they were marvelling, Ellen and Jane came back. They said that they had been called away to look at Ellen's mother, who was said to be very ill, but when they reached her mother, they found her never better. "Well, while you've been away, a gang's ransacked the house," Kay said. "Do look at what they've done. They don't seem to have taken much." "Oh, Master Kay," Ellen said, "whatever shall we do? Whatever will your guardian think?" "This is more of Abner's routine," Kay thought. "I must go and find the inspector," he said. The inspector was soon there with his notebook. "Ah," he said, looking at the study they'd been in. While the inspector began to examine the house for clues and footprints, Kay went to his room. "That's too reeked of strong plug tobacco. I know now who's been in here," he said. "Those wolves of the Gulf have been in. That's the plug tobacco that they were smoking in the cellar there." Hanging onto the bedpost of Peter's bed was a dirty red bonnet or cap of liberty, such as the pirates had worn at their carouse. It was very old and greasy. Inside, stitched on a piece of card with the legend, "R. Chop's cap. Hands off. This means you." The inspector went rapidly through the house and examining door handles for fingerprints through a strong lens. "Yes," he repeated after the examination, "they've been in. Smart London men, Master Kay, old hands. They've all worn gloves. I'll just ask what the maids say about it." Ellen and cook said that at about 3:30 a car had come from the Rupert's Arms, and with the words that the telephone message had come from Ellen's mother at Naunton Cruis to come at once, as she was dangerously ill. So she and cook had gone and found on arrival that the mother was well. "Well, that may be a clue," the inspector said, "but we may be able to trace where the telephone message came from, but it's none too rosy." "Ah, Maria hasn't come back," Kay said. "Ah, that reminds me," the inspector said. "I've got a message for you about that. Your young friend, Miss Jones, was at St Griswold's looking at the glass with some clerical gentlemen and a Father Bottledale, and they had lunch at the Bear's Paw, and after that Father Bottledale said that he and his young men said goodbye and came away, and Miss Jones was to come by a later bus. What happened to her since, we don't yet know, but she was seen at the Bear's Paw long after Father Bottledale had gone. But you leave the matter in the hands of the law, Master Kay. The law is said sometimes to be slow, but it never sleeps. While you are snug in your bed, Master Kay, and the law is up and about, taking thoughts for you and looking, your Miss Maria won't be long missing. You take my word for it. Presently the police had made all their examinations and had questioned everybody remotely connected with the seekings. They went away. Kay longed for his grandfather to be back. Even to have a word from her would have been much in this time of trouble, but there was no word from her. But as Ellen said, the posts are all upset for Christmas. After supper that night, as the 4 children were sitting around the study fire, the hall door opened and somebody came in. I wonder if that's my guardian, Kay said, and he went into the hall, and there was little Maria. I say, Maria, I'm glad to see you, he said. Where on earth have you been? I don't know where I've been, Maria said. I've been scrobbled, just like a greenhorn. I knew what it would be, not taking the pistol. Well, I pity them if I ever get near them again. They won't scrobble Maria Jones a second time. But what on earth happened to you, Peter said. You aren't usually the one to get scrobbled. Who scrobbled you? I don't know, she said. I went with those clergyman people, looking at the stained glass. Then we had lunch. It was the only good part of the proceedings. I'm very partial to duck patty. And then presently they went out and said they had got to go. Well, it was beastly wet, as you know, so I thought I'd take a taxi to the bus. Telephone for a taxi from the Bear's Paw. Taxi came. I got in. Drive me to the Market Square, please, I said. Presently I saw that it was going in a different way, so I said, Market Square. The driver said, the road's up, miss. Got to go this way. And at that he put on a speed, and a sort of cast iron curtain came down all over the windows. There I was, shut up in a black box, going about 50 miles an hour right out of Tatchester. I beat on the shutters, but they were cast iron, and I might have spared my strength, and the car went faster and faster and faster, and at last, from a queer lurch it gave, I knew that I was up in the air. Oh, that's rot, Peter said. How can a car go up in the air? And a Tadcaster taxi, poor old crooks tied together with bootlace. It wasn't a taxi, Maria said. I don't know what it was. It was something marvellous invention, but it was an aeroplane or a car that became an aeroplane. And there we were, lurching through the air, going lickety-split in absolute darkness. I hadn't a ghost of a notion in which direction we were heading. We were making hardly any noise, too. I couldn't have been an aeroplane then, Peter said. You must have an enormous powerful engine to go fast, with an enormous number of cylinders and an enormous number of explosions every second or so. Of course you have noise. I tell you, Maria said, this was an aeroplane, and it was silent, and it was going lickety-split. I say, Kay said, you are in luck, Maria. And what happened then? Well, it would have been about 2:45 when I got into the taxi, she said. Presently I felt that the aeroplane was dipping down. Then it touched the ground and went bumping over the grass for a while. Then I heard it scrunch on the gravel. Then I heard a sort of door clang behind it, and I said to myself, now we're in the garage. Then there came a sort of sickening feeling, as though we were dropping down a well. The shutter went up on one side of the door, and a thing opened, and I saw a light. Well, the light was along a little passage. It seemed to me that the car or the taxi or the aeroplane or whatever it was in a small stone cellar. The door was open, and as I said, I could see into this little passage with the light at the end. I didn't see anybody, but I got out of the aeroplane and walked towards the light. I came into a small room with no window, but a sort of little ventilator high up. The walls were rock. I touched them, and they had been whitewashed. It was lit from the ceiling about 12 foot up. I was no sooner in the room than a great iron door shot up behind me, and there I was, shut in. Then rather high up on the wall, an iron shutter slid to one side, and there was an iron grill with what I took to be a lady's face, and a very silky female voice said, Miss Maria Jones, please forgive any inconvenience we may have caused you in bringing you here, and above all, don't be afraid. I'm not used to being afraid, I said, but all the same I was afraid. We only brought you here, the female said, because we hope that you may be interested. We are rather in need of a dashing young associate at the moment, and we wondered whether you might persuade you to become that. Oh, I said, what are you, a gang of crooks? Oh, no, she said, a business community. Oh, I said, what business does your community do? Social service, she said. setting straight injustices with the least possible inconvenience to all concerned. And how do you do it, I asked. Oh, sometimes in one way and sometimes in another, she said. You would soon learn if you would join us. Why do you want me, I asked. Well, you were young, she said, and full of dash, and it's an interesting world for our young agents. Lots more motor cars, lots of aeroplanes. Life is one long, gay, social whirl. And what is the work, I asked. Ah, she said, we shall discuss that if you express a willingness to become one of us. If your job honest, I said, you'd say what it is. I can't be nice, or it wouldn't have been you in it. If the children are pert here, she said, we make them into dog biscuit. Many a good watchdog is barking now on insolent little chits like you. So I said, if ladies are pert to me, I make them into cat's meat. Many a good caterwaul I have fed to meat like you, cold. We should have become quite eloquent, but a black-bearded man's face appeared at the bars, and he said, now, ladies, the first word in business of any kind is unity. Do let us have unity. Without that we can never get anywhere. Now, Miss Jones, if we cannot have unity from you, let us have some information. When Mr. Cole Hawkins gave his performance of Punch and Judy at Seekings, did he hand you a small black box? No, I said, he didn't. Did he leave it with you on the other, or one of the other parties there, or hide it in Seeking's house? How on earth do I know, I said. That's the point, he answered. Do you know? Well, I don't know, I said. This time, by the light from the bars, I looked at my watch and found that it was 4 o'clock. You need not look at your watch, the woman said, if you have lots and lots of time. If I were you, sir, she added, I would put this young person into the scrounger. Do you know what a scrounger is, dear? Yes, I said, I don't think you do, she replied. It's a place that we put people into. It has a thing in it that goes round and round and round, which is the scrounger, and then presently, of course, the thing scrounged becomes dog biscuit. At that the shutter went across the bars and the light went out, and I was in absolute darkness and utter silence. I might have been 50 feet underneath the ground, I don't know how long. I was in that absolute blackness. I stood perfectly still for some little time, because I was afraid that there might be a trap door which would let me down into some dungeon. I say, Peter said, you're making all this up. Am I, she said. Let something of the sort happen to you and you'll see whether you can make it up. Presently I couldn't bear standing still. I thought that I might perhaps come to some door at the wall and it would lead somewhere, so I groped the wall and felt my way all round the room. I reckoned that it was 14 foot by 12 feet, cold stone walls, cold stone floors, but not damp, and the air neither chilly nor foggy, as it was well ventilated. I had gone all round the room feeling the wall, and there wasn't so much as a knob or a crack. I had gone round once and was starting round in the opposite direction to make absolutely certain, when suddenly down came something thick and warm and woolly right over my head and shoulders. I was pinioned, I couldn't see, but I felt that the light went on, and that horrible woman's voice said, all right, you needn't kick, and you needn't try to bite, and you can't scratch. I only just want you to know if you've got this box upon you. Well, I was searched, and then I was carried along little passage by which I had come, and I was put into the taxi which had brought me. They removed my woollens, and they thought I hit out pretty hard when they took it away. The woman was a lot too quick for me, and I only rapped my knuckles on the taxi door, which was sheet iron. They turned on a little light in the taxi roof, and I saw that they'd put me a pot of tea and some cold ham and some bread inside the taxi. So I thought, well, nothing like keeping one's pecker up, and so I made a hearty meal. Was there any knife with the food, Kay said. No such luck, she said. I had to eat it with my fingers. I had soon hacked my way out if they had left me a knife. Weren't you afraid of the food being drugged, Jemima said. No, that never occurred to me, Maria said. I'd been through a good deal of mental strain and had to restore my nervous force. Well then, after I'd made a meal, I looked about, and there on the floor of the taxi was a little bit of pink tissue paper. I picked this up, and it was a bit of those coloured papers which floated down after the Punch and Judy man had gone. You remember, Susan, that one had a bit of your name torn from it. Well, this is the very bit, you see, says Jones. It was the one designed for you. I've got the torn cape here, Susan said. You see, it does fit. How very, very strange. Yes, Maria said, that Punch and Judy man was one of the gang. He was nothing of the sort, Kay said. He was scrobbled by the gang, and the morning after his performance, and he was scrobbled in the sort of aeroplane that carried you. But what happened next? Well, I waited and waited for what seemed like hours. I didn't hear any sound of men, only from time to time I thought I heard very, very far away a noise of water falling, quite a lot of water, a sort of waterfall. Then the light went out and I was in the dark. I suppose, what with fatigue and fear and one thing and another, I fell asleep, and next thing I knew was the taxi was moving. I heard some roller doors clang open and was scrunched on the gravel, and then we ran upon grass, and then we gave that sort of lurching leap that an aeroplane does as we're away in the air, going higher and higher and making no noise, and then presently we were on the ground, running along the road. We stopped, the bottom of the aeroplane quietly opened and dropped me through it, and before I could get onto my feet it had moved away, and there I was in the churchyard with the Condicott church clock striking 9 and chiming, and the taxi or aeroplane or whatever it was away. It just lifted up past the church and was gone. Did you see which way it went? Kay said. It was just went behind the church, and then I couldn't see it any further. I hadn't the vaguest notion where I'd been. I shouldn't think we were flying for an hour and a quarter both times, but I don't doubt that we were going at a frightful speed. We might have got to Scotland for all that I know. We might easily have gone 300 miles. I say, Peter said, do you have all the luck? Well, I'm awfully glad that you got out of it. Would you like to go round and tell your story to the police inspector? I'm not going to tell any more story, Mary said. What I want is underdone chops and plenty of them. I'm going to build up my nervous system before anything else, and then I'm going to bed. Well, come along down the ladder, Kay said, and Jemima, you must put on the kettle and we'll boil up some cocoa. I'm not going to drink any poison like cocoa, thank you, Maria said. When one's had a nervous strain such as I have, one wants a posset with 3 fresh eggs in it and a spoonful of sherry. They went into the larder and found the nourishing meal after Maria's own heart. Then Jemima and Susan stood up to bed and gave her a posset. Kay and Peter went up to their room. Well, I'm blessed, Peter said. We're having a holiday. I wonder what is in the black box that the gang wanted. I shouldn't wonder if it wouldn't be the Duchess's diamonds that were stolen. I hope they wouldn't kidnap any more of us, Kay said, and with that he slipped the black box under his pyjama coat next to his skin, rolled over and fell asleep. He hadn't been long asleep before he woke at a state of perplexity and excitement. He kept thinking of what Maria had told him. He said to himself, she must have been 50 feet under the ground in the cold stone walls and cold stone floors. Well, she must have been underground. And where was it I was reading about or heard about, caves underneath the ground? It was that Roman chap last night talking about Chester Hills, he said. It's a limestone country, all honeycombed with caves, and those walls, as we call them, were all underground. I wonder whether this gang is at Chester Hills. There could be nothing like a lot of underground caves for the secret quarters of a gang. Get down there with their airplanes, which can become taxis by pressing a button, and then the police might hunt for years and never find them. And then, what if this theological missionary college could really be a gang in disguise? It's just what I should do if I were a gangster, pretend to be a clergyman. And I'm sure that Abner Brown is that man that they call Father Bottledale, the Reverend Father Bottledale, D.D. He's a magician and a gangster of the deepest dye, and now that he's married to the Pouncer, he's probably 5 times as bad as he ever was before, and I do wish my guardian were here, and then I could ask her advice. He fell asleep again, but could dream of nothing but caves, dark and damp, and the noise of dripping water, and long staircases hanging from the roofs. When he would wake up from being, as he thought, a prisoner in one cave, he would fall asleep and dream of another, black as a pocket, with water falling into some bottomless pit. Now he remembered something that somebody had said to him of the people of Chester Hill at the old days, stealing and killing sheep and dropping them down potholes into underground waters, which would carry the carcasses of the sheep for some miles and bring them out into other potholes where people waited for them. He seemed to remember that in the story somebody had said that once, when the people were waiting for the sheep to appear, the body of a thief appeared. That was the Chester Hills, he thought, and then he slept again and seemed to hear the voice of Caroline Louisa calling to him in great distress from a great distance. And in his dream he seemed that he'd answered her and asked, "Where are you?" and heard her cry, "Here," and ran towards the voice and found nothing but stone walls against which he beat and thrust, but could find no door or any window. But through the thickness of the stone came the voice, "I'm shut up here in the darkness, Kay. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere. I can hear the noise of water falling." Then he woke up, but found nothing but the dark night with a little glimmer of moonlight coming through the curtain, and the fire in the grate almost out. I'm almost sure they've got here in Chester Hills somehow, he muttered. Though why, he wondered, and how, and of course, if they'd gone here into one of those taxis, they could have flown her to Chester Hills in less than an hour, even from London. He fell asleep again, but passed an uneasy night. When he awoke again, it was time to get up, and so he dressed and was down by 8 o'clock. By some fortune or freak of the post was in spite of the Christmas rush, but as Ellen said, it was probably the post of 2 days before. There was no letter from Caroline Louisa.